What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the weekend college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as they do each and every Thursday afternoon, my fellow BBOC co-hosts Mike Calabrese and Greg Waddel. Get to quick week recap with some good and some ugly. We will add a futures to our portfolio with the Futures Roundtable. We'll talk a little with Tanner McGrath to get his America East Saturday betting preview, and then we'll give out some weekend looks for both Friday, Saturday, and possibly Sunday on the first weekend without any college football or NFL since August. And no, the Pro Bowl does not count, especially in its current form. So it's all college basketball all the time from here on out. Let's jump right in. Let's do some. Let's start with the good. Start off on a positive note. We talked about this team a couple weeks ago, and I said I needed to see more. I'm starting to come around on Maryland being legit. I know Illinois was shorthanded, but they dominated that game. And then I thought just tough spot, winning at Indiana, coming away with that win, and then backing it up with another home win over Wisconsin. They've now won 6 of 7. The lone loss came in overtime at Northwestern. This team, I think, is a bona fide threat to at least make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. I'll also I got to give a shout out to Josh Hubbard of Miss State, who almost single-handedly beat Alabama. Incredible performance for Mississippi State. Alabama shot 15 of 30 from three. That's basically when you never beat Alabama when that happens. And he almost single-handedly did. Mississippi State misses a wide-open layup to take the lead in the final seconds. You got to dunk that ball, by the way. And then I got to give a shout-out to a unsung hero that many might not have seen. And it was... I watched this. I signed up for these games are on like Summit. I forget the website, but you got to go to a website and sign up. It's like Midco Sports something. But South Dakota, they were shorthanded, which I didn't even know before I bet it. And Dre Bullock gets the start and goes for 31. And finally, someone made a three against Omaha. I mean, it started out, they were, I think, 70% in the first half, and South Dakota was like 10%. And I said, here we go again. South Dakota makes an incredible comeback to hand Omaha its first league loss. So there's some good that I saw. Greg, I'll throw it to you. Who do you want to shout out?
Yeah, the story this season, we've talked about it on this very program, has been it's Duke, it's Auburn. Two teams trending historically dominant, and they've got the National Player of the Year candidates. It's Janai Broome, it's Cooper Flagg. Quietly, over the last 2 weeks, Houston has overtaken them according to every analytics service possible. Czech Torvik, KenPom, Evan Mia, Haslam, doesn't matter. They all have Houston as the best team in the country right now. And I do think people have noticed. Of course, it was hard to notice the double overtime thriller against Kansas, where they were fortunate to win that game thanks to some late game errors.
That's one way of saying it, Greg.
Yeah, it was crazy. But outside of that game, I mean, this is the best Kelvin Sampson Houston defense. And I know they're number one, if not top 5 in the last 5 years. This is the best version of it that we've seen. 11 of their last 13 games, they've held teams under 60 points. 6 of the last 12 have been under 50. I mean, it's insane. They've covered 8 of 10 games at this point. They don't have the star power. It's not as fun to talk about this team as it is the teams with Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shedd. But I just think it's crazy. When the story has been Duke or Auburn, Houston's quietly been better, and it's almost like nobody's even noticed.
Yeah, I mean, is it going to be the same story then, though? I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, they finished number 2 on KenPom, and haven't got there. And what has happened, I think, last year or 2 years ago, they just got destroyed by Miami, who put up 90 on them. But their 2 other losses surrounding that loss were against Duke and Villanova in games that were basically like 50-45. That's my fear for them, is that they're just going to play a game. Their defense is going to show up. They're going to play a game that's like 53-49, and the other team just has ball handlers that could make open threes. That's my only fear. But yeah, they're certainly in that upper echelon of teams. Now, I will say that, yeah, they got fortunate against UCF. They got fortunate against Kansas, but their only losses on the year, 5 to Auburn, and then in overtime against Alabama and San Diego State. So, yeah, I agree. They're not getting it as much hype as usual. I think people are just tired of Houston being the analytical darling and then not winning it, right? So people are just – but you got to remember how fluky the NCAA tournament is, and it's one and done. But I think that's probably driving some of this. It's like, oh, Houston's the analytical darling again. You've seen this story before. But, yeah, they're certainly in the mix to win it all. Calabrese?
To shout out your Maryland call, Rodney Rice, I think he's the difference maker. If he plays at any level above 15 points in a given night, I don't really know how, outside of a few elite teams, how you beat Maryland. Because you know what you're going to get from the front court with Reese and Queen. And Gillespie is somebody that I've really liked the addition. Some people say it was kind of a wash in terms of what they lost to the point last year, but at least he's been a stabilizing factor running things for the Terps. But when Rice shoots that well from the perimeter and goes for 20 plus, like, good luck beating that team. And we talked about it in the last episode, Greg, if they slide into that 7-8 seed line, there's a couple teams outside of Auburn and Duke who I think could be susceptible to around a 32 upset if they get bad luck and they draw the Terrapins. Now, right now, they're trending like they're going to go closer to like a 5 or a 6 if this keeps up the rest of the year. But if they kind of fall back to earth a little bit, they could be a landmine for someone outside of a team like Houston. My feeling on the Cougs pretty much is they're upset proof in the first weekend because of their defense. But outside of that, I still have my concerns about them being able to handle some late game situations on the offensive ends. So, I mean, the Kansas game, we also talked about it on Tuesday. Naturally, it was the most improbable win between two ranked teams in like Ken Palm's entire historical database in terms of a team being down that much in the final 20 seconds and then coming back to win. So does that say more about Houston? I mean, certainly they made the shots, they made the plays. I think Kansas deserves to get raked over the coals for what they've turned into, particularly at home. But this is the positive segment. I'm going to throw out some positivity for a team that I don't think we've talked about much. The Johnnies have lost once since Thanksgiving, a 1-point road loss to Creighton. That's it. They swept Xavier. They beat Nova by 12. They just dog-walked Georgetown and DC by 25. They've covered 5 of their last 6. And this defense is so versatile and athletic. Evan Mia and Ken Palm both have them rated as the 4th best defense in the country. I think it's deserved. Ejiofor has really come into his own this season, as well as RJ Lewis Jr., which I think is interesting because usually in the transfer portal era, if you don't get instant results, it's like, okay, that guy needs to transfer out. He didn't work. Those guys have gotten better, under Pitino. So I think it goes as a statement to, certainly something you have to acknowledge. The coaching staff, the player development, that's not something that like gets mentioned all that much in college basketball anymore. It kind of feels like these AAU teams that get thrown together in a single summer. These guys have grown together. I just wonder in terms of their overall ceiling if Kadari Richmond can ever reclaim some of that offensive firepower that he had last year. Certainly this is a different team. They have different needs. He's not taking as many shots. But my thought coming into the season was that if Richmond was all conference material, maybe they could flirt with a regular season title. Maybe they could make a run in the Big East tournament. They haven't needed him. I wonder if he turns it on a little bit at even just in spots moving forward when they play some of the elite teams. But I'm really impressed with what the Johnnies have done. I think they're still flying under the national radar because they're another one of those teams that I think the general public would say, okay, great, show it to me in March. You haven't done it in 2 generations in March since essentially the 80s. They haven't been able to put it together. So I want to see it as a Johnny fan. I think the defense gives them a very high floor, but I just want to make sure that I'm shouting them out for what they've done in Queens.
Yeah. By the way, back to Maryland, I think that the difference between this year's team and last year's, there's a stark contrast. I mean, Reese is now playing the 4, where he's much more effective. Last year, he was like their only big, and then he would get in foul trouble, and then it was Maryland had nothing. Maryland also couldn't shoot a lick last year. like one of the worst shooting teams in the country. And now they're a decent shooting team. And you have Queen at the 5 and Reese at the 4. It's just a world of difference. Like the team can shoot. They have big help and depth there. They're not as reliant on Reese doing everything inside. So, yeah, they're just a much, much different team this year. In regards to St. John's, I mean, the good thing is they'll get Devion Smith back soon. They need him just to make some threes. The offense is disgusting. They can't shoot. St. John's against Georgetown, yeah, their defense was outstanding, but they had like 3 separate 5-minute scoring droughts in that game, which is crazy. So if they face a team that just, that doesn't turn it over and, keeps them out of transition and getting easy buckets, and they're going to be aggressive, like a team that just takes care, like a veteran team that takes care of the ball and that can hit threes, gets back in transition. Johnnies are going to be in close games. And then if you look, they haven't lost. Their defense has been incredible. There's no doubt about that. Their defense is legit. Is Xavier a tournament team right now? Borderline?
Close.
If we say Xavier's not, then...
Yeah, I think Xavier's a pure bubble team right now at best and probably on the wrong side of the bubble.
So if we say Xavier's out, St. John's hasn't beat a single tournament team all year.
0-3 versus KenPom top 40 teams. That was my note. So I like watching St. John's. I think they are playing better than anybody in the Big East right now. I'm also so ready to fade the entire Big East when we get to the NCAA tournament because I don't think there's a team here other than Marquette if Cam Jones just goes nuclear in March that really has some upside. But yeah, you got to my point. Like I think this St. John's, because of what they are defensively, they are rarely going to lose to teams that just aren't very good because they smother you. The question is, what are they going to do when they see the better teams? Now, Baylor, that game against St. John's way back in November, right? Feast week, I think, double overtime, one of the more entertaining games of the year. That certainly could have been a St. John's win, and this would negate the point. But they haven't had many quality win opportunities. Shout out to the Big East schedule makers because we get St. John's at Marquette, the final game of the regular season. Hopefully there's some stakes in that game. But to me, I'm still a little skeptical. This might be a good sell high time, honestly, because they've got 2 against Marquette, 2 against UConn coming up, 1 more against Creighton. I think that final stretch will tell us what they really are.
Greg, do you have any thought? What do you think is wrong with the Marquette offense right now in league play? Like, is it just shot making? I mean, because obviously they shoot a lot of threes and they're not going in right now. But I mean, all year they haven't been a great shooting team.
Yeah, I think they're really one-dimensional. And as good as Cam Jones has been, what made last year's team special was you had this guy so capable that was really relegated to like a space the floor shot making role that could do more. This year's team, it's all Cam, and he's been slumping. I forget what his conference only numbers are right now, but I think coming into this week, he was like 18% from 3 in conference play. He's up to 25% in conference play right now. They're just going to go as he goes, and he's been very iffy since conference play started. It's a lot of pressure on one guy.
Yeah, a lot on his plate. Like, is he starting to is there just going to be fatigue there and especially towards the end of the year? It's something definitely worth monitoring. Make extra money daily from your sports betting? Stuckey from Action Network here. You know I'm always about finding ways to take sports betting to the next level, and that's exactly why I'm pumped to tell you about Edge Boost, the financial platform that pays you cash back to wager. Edge Boost is an online bank account that pays you for every deposit. With the Edge Boost Visa debit card, you're getting up to 0.5% cash back on all your sportsbook, daily fantasy site, and casino transactions. That's free money back in your pocket just for doing whatever you're already doing. It's a no-brainer. Plus, your Edge Boost debit card starts with a $250,000 daily limit and will never be declined for gambling activity. They've got built-in tools to help you stay responsible, and there's absolutely no hidden fees or minimum required balances. So stop leaving free money on the table. Visit edgeboost.bet to learn more and sign up today. That's edgeboost.bet. Let's go to the ugly or a rant of the week. I got to go TCU. I had TCU plus 14. Luckily, I know some people had a worse number. Some people had a better number. Luckily, they threw a length of the court pass with 2 seconds left and dunked it to push. They're down 7 with 2 minutes to go, and they have a breakaway layup. The guy gets clobbered. They don't call it. There's a breakaway 3 the other way. And they missed a million free throws, covering the whole game and don't cover. Sickening. They also lost the starting guard with like 10 minutes to go. I feel like I'm betting football. Every team I bet, a starting guard gets hurt in the game, or there's like injury. It's insane lately. So very mad at TCU for sure. And I also had Georgetown, so I'm mad at myself for betting them against St. John's, because that game, it was like 20-0, 6 minutes in, and I was like, oh, this is toast. Greg, how about you? Who are you mad at, or what do you want to rant about?
I'm disgusted by the Tennessee offense, because this is a team I have developed a lot of respect for, or a program that I've developed a lot of respect for. I loved the whole angle that, hey, this was the year after the year. Everybody thought Connect was the guy that would take them to the run, and Lanier was arguably on a Connect-like pace through November, and maybe this is going to be the year they surprise everybody. This offense is so limited. And against Kentucky, a team who has not been good defensively at all for 2 months, but the one redeemable thing they do is guard the three-point line. They get torched inside, and Tennessee just refused to attack them inside. They had like 9 chances in the final minute, down 5 points, and they're just launching threes repeatedly and getting the offensive rebound. It was driving me insane. Zakai Ziegler's a tough kid. He is a limited offensive player when he looks to score for himself. And he's been on a lot of winning teams at Tennessee where if he's in the third or fourth option role, great. He can do all his gritty leadership defensive things and get the ball to the better options. This team just doesn't have those secondary guys. I mean, Igor Milicic can be that guy. I don't trust the eye test with him at all. Gainey is way too inconsistent. Dubar was supposed to be a great piece from the portal, and he's barely playable right now. But I just couldn't believe my eyes. 45 threes in a game against the Kentucky defense. They shot 15 for 67 from 3 in back-to-back losses this week. Ziegler was 1 for 17 himself. Rick Barnes has to look in the mirror and get this right, because if their plan is just to launch from outside, it's going to be a very rough end of the season for Tennessee.
Well, speaking of the Vols, are you too fearful of them on Saturday? Because that's one of the spots of the year. They have a 1 billion point revenge from getting embarrassed in Florida. A game where they started 1 of 25 from 3. And they're coming off 2 straight losses. Florida is legit. They're good, but they've also had the easiest SEC schedule to date. Florida did not score in the half court in that first meeting. And I don't think their half court offense, which is so reliant on their guards penetrating, really works against Tennessee. They scored 0.8 points per possession in the half court. Florida wants to run. They were able to do that some in the first meeting, because that's what happens when the other team goes 1 of 26 from 3. And Florida's a lead in transition, 92nd percentile frequency, 88th percentile efficiency. But Tennessee gives up the 5th fewest transition possessions per game in the country from a frequency standpoint. So they usually just don't let you get in transition at all. Now, I worry a bit about the offensive glass for Florida, but Tennessee's going to get threes. I think Florida's been running a bit fortunate with their 3-point defense. Tennessee's going to have to make their shots. If they do that, then they'll be able to set up their half-court defense, and I don't think Florida's going to have much success. Tennessee, are they due to make threes, or are they just slumping? I don't know, but from a spot perspective, it's as good as it gets. Are you too afraid of Tennessee right now?
I am, but I applaud you if you're not, because I see the smirk on your face, and you may talk me into this by the end of the episode. It is the spot of the year. I will say Ziegler's whole run to the locker room limping, Barnes called it out at halftime. He's like, that's the toughest kid I've ever coached. I've never seen him react like that. Now, he toughed out the second half, but he looked like he couldn't really move and just kept launching threes. So I'm a little worried there's an issue there. And if he's not 100%, I think Tennessee's cooked given how much they ask of him. But no, you make a lot of good points. The spot screams Tennessee, certainly a revenge play. You're 100% right. The Florida defense has a lot of 3-point luck going for it this year. And, if you're waiting for luck to flip, Tennessee is due to just shoot 50% in one game. So I'm staying away because I'm terrified of Ziegler's injury.
Yeah, Ziegler does need to be 100%. I need to check on that for sure. Just the ball pressure that he can help. provide on the perimeter to kind of take Florida out of their half court offense is massive. So yeah, I'll try to get more intel there. Calabrese, what do you got?
I'm still not over Kansas, what they did against Houston. And then they come back. That performance against UCF does not move the needle for me whatsoever. They're 1-4 against the spread in their last 5. And you look at it, I think their defense has some holes that aren't necessarily easy to spot when you just, peruse their advanced metrics. But they don't force turnovers. 14% of opponent possessions ended in turnovers. That's 260th in the whole country. They foul a little bit more than I'd like to see. And they're 15-5, straight up in their overall record, despite extraordinary 3-point variance in their favor. Opponents are shooting less than 30% from long range. That's the 20th best mark in terms of being fortunate in terms of those triples falling. And I'm just going to call this out now. There's going to be some fool's gold brewing in Lawrence, because when you look at their upcoming schedule outside of hosting Iowa State, here's the slate: at Baylor, at K-State, home against Colorado, at Utah, at BYU, home against Oklahoma State, at Colorado. That's what's around the bend. They're going to start stacking wins. They're going to find themselves back in the AP top 10. And I think the prices are going to start to be a little bit prohibitive in terms of backing the Jayhawks. So I think I'm just going to start unloading the clip at the end of that run in terms of taking points against KU. I just don't see it. I also think there's the locker room dynamic of the potential time bomb of Hunter Dickinson just kind of, being who he is and not having a lot of fun and kind of draining the energy from that locker room, because this is a grind now. They're no longer a title threat in the Big 12, at least in my opinion. They're just another really good Big 12 team, but not one of those elite teams. So I think with them being outside of that conversation with Iowa State and Houston, we'll see where they go, because this is a program that clearly has been at the very top of the sport for so long. How does Bill Self manage this team? But like I said, I want to focus in. I want to see them stack as many wins. I want to see them beat Colorado by 35 points, because I don't care. I'm just waiting for that to impact some spreads in later February, and that's why I'm going to hop back on fading KU.
KU Baylor. Yeah, I mean, I don't. KU's definitely flawed right now. But Self's still trying to figure out just what this rotation should look like. So we'll see if he gets it figured out. I mean, I think the problem has been that AJ Storr has been a complete disaster.
He's been nothing. He hasn't brought a single thing to them. And I agree. I mean, once again, though, how bad is Baylor's defense? Could they make them look really good?
Could Kansas carve them in transition is what I'm worried about. But I'm also worried about Baylor's they're like so short depth wise right now. They're coming off 2 altitude games, 1 in overtime. I don't know. I think it's a decent spot for Baylor. Kansas, speaking, you mentioned the 3-point regression. Like, Baylor can make them pay. Edgecombe's playing phenomenal as of late. I think that it would help them if they got Love. I don't know what's going on with Love, and Jeremy Roach, if he's back, they just need more depth. Just more, like, that would help a lot. I think Roach is close. He was in concussion, and they played Tuesday. I think it's been like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So that could help. And then we obviously have to watch the status of DeJuan Harris. I don't think Kansas is nowhere near the same team without him out there, contrary to like a small minority of Kansas fans who think otherwise. But Harris, it was a Tuesday game, but he couldn't do anything. Self said he couldn't do anything on the ankle on Tuesday. But yeah, there's some personnel watch for that game. Do you have any quick thoughts on that, Greg? Baylor, Kansas?
I would lean Baylor for sure. Part of this is the Big 12 turnaround weekend, Saturday, Monday, too. Kansas has Iowa State on Monday. You can't tell me they're not at least half looking ahead to that. If Harris isn't 100%, that's huge. They looked broken against UCF a little bit and got some very fortunate calls late. The end game stuff was not fixed at all. They still couldn't get the ball in bounds. And Bill Self, you said he's trying to figure out rotations. I don't care who's available, who's not. KJ Adams, Flory Badunga, and Hunter Dickinson on the court together is an insane attempt from Bill Self. Like, those 3 guys should never play together. This is not the 1980s. And I don't think he gets enough criticism, honestly. Like, in the middle of the end of last season, he was saying, I just can't wait for next year. And we're just supposed to accept that AJ Storr, who was awesome last year, is unplayable. Rylan Griffin, who was very good at Alabama, is unplayable now. I don't get why more people aren't pointing fingers at this. But as Mike said, Hunter Dickinson, this is a theme. This is year 5. Every team he's ever been on just looks like they don't enjoy playing basketball by the end of January. And I think it's a good time to pounce on VJ Edge coming home.
End of the regular season, by the way, they finished with Texas Tech and Lawrence at Houston, home against Arizona. Like I said, I want as many empty calorie wins against the Oklahoma States and Colorados of the world so that there's wind in the sails of the Jayhawks, at least from public perception wise. And I'm just going to fade 3 games in a row.
You could see Baylor play a little bit more zonier too. It's not, Kansas isn't a great shooting team. So we'll see how much zone Drew uses in that matchup. All right, but let's get to our futures roundtable. If you are just joining us, our 2 team futures on the season are Illinois and Texas A&M to make the Final Four. We'll add one today. I'll kick things off. Every year we need a horse. We need I think just one national championship future. I forget if we had one last. I think we did have one last year. We hit with UConn 2 years ago. I forgot to go back and look what our national title future was. It was not UConn. So I'm going to go with Iowa State 12-1, implying what 7-8% chance, which I think isn't too egregious. But I think that if I look at the schedule, by the way, yeah, they go to Kansas. It's probably a loss, but it's like a coin flip-ish game. Even if they lose that game, you have Kansas State at home, TCU at home, UCF, Cincy, Colorado. If they win that Kansas game, there's a good chance they win 6 straight coming up here before they go to Houston. And then, you got Oklahoma State, you have Arizona, revenge game at home, BYU at home, then Kansas State. This is a team that I think is going to just stack up wins the rest of the year. And if you look at their losses, they lost to Auburn on a neutral court at the buzzer. They lost to Arizona because of a 55-foot prayer. And then they lost to West Virginia in a game, and they went 1 of 18 from 3 on the road. I think this team has all of the pieces. You have as good of a backcourt as you can ask for. You have a guy in Curtis Jones who can just get red hot. Last year, they did not have the post play, and they didn't have the rebounding. If you look just last year's raw numbers, they were 197th in defensive rebounding rate, top 50 this year. 2-point percentage offense, 140th last year, 26th this year. They have the offense to match. They fit the profile of a team that can win the national title. They're 13th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 6th in adjusted defensive efficiency. And they're building depth now because Momcilovic, who I think is really important to their offense, he's been out. You have some other guys stepping up. But he's coming back. Cast is off. This will be week of rest. And they're, by the way, they're really well coached. Otzelberger said week 4 is probably aggressive. Week 4 of his recovery. So that would probably put him, I'm assuming he comes back February 15th against Cincy, a week before the Houston game. So I think this team has it all. Offense, defense. From a shot volume perspective, they can rebound on both ends. They don't turn it over. They turn you over. It's I think this is a team. And by the way, if you look some of the markets out there, so they're up 12-1 at a couple places. I think they should be 10-1. And I think that they're in that elite tier of the top 4 or 5 teams. And if I look at the Final Four odds, Auburn's -120, Duke's -120, Houston's +140, Iowa State's +160 at a very prominent book. But national title odds, you got Duke and Auburn at 4-1, and I can get Iowa State at 12-1. Now, I don't think Iowa State is as good, but I don't think they're too far behind. And I think they're in that elite tier. So, and I have no interest in backing a team 4-1 in the futures market. So 12-1 is my case for Iowa State as our horse to win the national title. Greg, you're going to your backyard.
I'm going to my backyard. So I'm going to propose something that I think maybe defies the talking point nationally on this team. Michigan State, 6-1 to earn a 1 seed. Now let's talk 1 seed candidates here. Duke's going to get one, ACC champ. They're going to create separation. Houston's going to get one, Big 12 champ, create separation. Auburn's likely going to get one, SEC champ, likely some separation. Outside of that, I don't think the Big East champ is getting one. I think you're looking at a team that may lose 5 or 6 games in the SEC or the Big 12 that jumps up and gets that 4th 1 seed, maybe in Iowa State, like you mentioned, maybe in Alabama. Those are probably the lead candidates, or the team that's already created the separation in the Big Ten, the league that Ken Pom says is the 2nd strongest league in college basketball this year, even bigger, even better than the Big 12. Maybe they just hold that separation. I mean, if they do exactly what Ken Pom projects, they finish the year 16-4 in the Big Ten, win the conference by 2 games, 25-6. Sounds like a 1 seed to me. Everybody wants to point out the fact that their schedule was really backloaded. The entire months of December and January, where Michigan State didn't lose, undefeated for the first time in Tom Izzo's tenure. They didn't really play anybody all that good other than Illinois. That was the game with all the fouls on Yakashonis. I get it. All fair points. But while everybody wants to say, the good teams are coming, quietly, Michigan State has proven they're not going to lose a bad one. That's not going to happen this season. They're not going to slip up against a team they shouldn't. There will be no black marks on the resume. And from a resume standpoint, when we talk March, yeah, maybe it's not great for their Big Ten championship hopes, which they're 2 games up on Purdue on right now, that they have some big-time opponents coming up. But these are quality win opportunities. If they go 500 down the stretch against the Purdues, the Illinois, the Michigans of the world, this team's going to be right where they want to be, still be 2 games ahead on everybody else in the league. They're 7th in the AP poll right now. If they start to win some of these games, I think that only rises. And maybe the biggest thing, Purdue, they only play once. They play them at home at the Breslin Center. I know I'm making a case that they're just going to win the Big Ten comfortably. But if they do that, I would take a chance on them at 6-1. You compare it to where Alabama is priced right now. You compare it to where Iowa State is priced to get that 4th 1 seed. They're both around 2-1, 2.5-1. I think it's really good value on the Spartans, who are very likely to win the Big Ten at this point.
Yeah, my only pushback would be, obviously they've played the easiest conference schedule to date. Everyone has already talked about that, but they're non-conference, not great. Does that hold them back from being a 1? I mean, they beat North Carolina in overtime. Are we sure North Carolina's getting in? And then they lost to Kansas and Memphis on neutral courts. The rest of their games were jokes against a bunch of clowns. So does that hurt them? My prediction is that if they're close, they're going to a very Iowa thing to do would Iowa beats them in like the second to last game. To clinch their NIT berth. But yeah, I don't hate it. Are you coming, or are you like starting to come around on Michigan State? I mean, it's hard to, they're winning this game, so you have to give them credit, but I mean, it's not like we've seen them against elite teams, and you can always say like, hey, Penn State wasn't at full strength. Illinois got a bad whistle. Rutgers wasn't at full strength. So there's all these caveats, but the depth is there. Obviously they're well coached. Are you starting to come around on them, or do you still have just seeds of doubt?
No, I am. I think you don't make it through the month of January without a loss, without kind of proving those doubters wrong. And I just don't think they've earned the narrative credit that they deserve at this point. Their depth is truly impossible to prepare for. Like every time you listen to one of the opposing Big Ten coaches talk about it after the game, they're like, we have no idea how to prep for this team because the 8th leading scorer might be the guy that kills us compared to the 1st leading scorer. And nobody ever, like if they get in foul trouble, it doesn't matter because they've got 3 guys at every single position. I think we talked about it a couple episodes ago. Jace Richardson is the guy that we want to see emerge. He went to Madison Square Garden against Rutgers and was the best freshman on the floor in a game that did have a hobbled Dylan Harper, but Ace Bailey played. And Jace Richardson stole the show, in my opinion, off the bench for Michigan State. So I see a path for the ceiling. I just, again, from a March perspective, everybody wants to say, well, the tough games are coming. if Michigan State really just is quietly very good, that's a good thing. They're going to pick off some of these better teams. It's going to improve the resume. They're top 20 in adjusted offense and defense right now. I kind of just start to think they're a buzzsaw, and this might be the time to pounce because truly the reason I like this play, I mean, otherwise you could just lay the number and bet them to win the Big Ten, which is still reasonably priced right now. But I like this play because I think there's 3 stone cold 1 seeds, and I think the 4th is going to be a gauntlet. And while I like Iowa State, I like Alabama, there's certainly other teams in the SEC that could work their way into the mix. They're going to pick each other off in a way that I don't think Michigan State is going to be picked off down the stretch.
I kind of want to fade them this weekend against USC just because I think they're getting the peak of the market value. But I'm afraid USC, number one, if they get in foul trouble, they're screwed. It doesn't matter for Michigan State. USC can at least compete on the defensive glass, but does USC have the size? Is USC just going to get killed inside by Michigan State? That's my fear there, which might keep me away from USC, who I can never figure out. But Michigan State just might just dominate inside. So that's my concern for their trip out west. Calabrese, what do you got?
I'm going to go with something really conservative here just to kind of balance this out. I was kind of shocked to see that St. Mary's is only about minus 150, minus 165 to win the WCC. They're undefeated in conference play. They got a 2-game lead. They get the Zags on Saturday on their home floor. It's a simple hedge there. You can just take the Zags to win outright, or maybe wait to see if you can get a live number, get them plus a couple points. It's probably going to close like the Bulldogs minus 1 or 2 in that game. And then when you look at the Gales, it's a pretty simple formula. They're just about top 30 on both ends of the floor, which is extraordinary for mid-major, low major, whatever you want to call the WCC. And then the winning formula, they play really slow. They're a great half-court defense. They're a great rebounding team. They have very few turnovers. They're incredibly well coached. And they have this mindset. Can be their three-peat for the WCC regular season title. So it's not something that the pressure is on them in a weird way, or they need to prove it to themselves so they can get over the hump against, the Zags in conference play. They've done it. They've continually done it. I think they're clearly the class here. So to have them, what I think is a pretty reasonable number at minus 160, I think that's enough to jump in on SMC here. This is a team that I gave out the other night against Santa Clara. I think they held Santa Clara without a bucket.
They went on a 30-0 run.
Yeah, so it's like that's the definition of Santa Clara's new money. They're excited. They beat the Zags. They're like, okay, we're going to be a real threat in the WCC, and then they run into a buzzsaw. I think the Gales are a buzzsaw, so that's what I'm going to throw out there. Not as sexy as your 2 plays, although I will say about Michigan State, the whole narrative, everything you laid out, Greg, if the number was just a little bit better, because I think to myself, if they get into a spot where Iowa State and Houston are neck and neck and they flip-flop who wins the regular season title, who wins the Big 12 title, it's going to take probably a Big 10 tournament title, that cherry on top, to feel like you're really good going into Selection Sunday to get that 4th 1 seed. And I think the Big 10 tournament is going to be war. I think really, after their first game, they're just going to be playing hungry, quality opponents. And we just haven't seen it yet. I don't want to even pretend that I know exactly what's inside this Michigan State team, because they just haven't faced really good teams at full strength since November. So I need to see a little bit more. But like I said, if it was closer to 10-1, maybe even like an 8 or a 9, I'd be interested. But I feel like the price isn't quite right.
By the way, St. Mary's, Gonzaga, Saturday night, great game. I'm thinking of taking Gonzaga, which is why I probably won't go with yours, Calabrese. But my thinking in this game, I mean, can Gonzaga close out a game against a quality opponent? I don't know. But St. Mary's just dominates shot volume in like every game because of their rebounding. I mean, they're second in the country in offensive rebounding rate. But Gonzaga is a really, really good rebounding team. And Gonzaga won't turn it over. Top 10 in that department. So I think like from a rebounding turnover, I mean, St. Mary's doesn't turn over. Like that's all going to be neutralized. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's Gonzaga's talent that wins out, because I think they do have much more talent. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there, Greg?
I just kind of agree. St. Mary's has been the class this season. Gonzaga's been so up and down. Like if you get A+ Gonzaga, I think they would beat St. Mary's. I think they'd beat almost anybody in the country. If you get F Gonzaga, they can lose to anybody in this conference. So I'll take the team that just is more stable. I think they've been much better coached. I mean, Mark Few still doesn't seem to have a pulse on who should be in his rotation or who should be featured night to night. I don't like that at all. We saw Battle go nuclear in Gonzaga's last game off the bench. It's almost like it happened by surprise at this point. So, yeah, I'm staying away from a betting spot purpose just because, like, I do get weary of the team that's 2 games up in the standings looking down at the rival that needs this one desperately. But over the rest of the season, like, St. Mary's is going to win at least a share of this league. So it's a safe play, like Mike said.
All right, let's go to the vote. 1 for Iowa State, 2 for Michigan State, 3 for St. Mary's. 3, 2, 1. Did you vote for your own? Can't vote for your own.
Who's me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought 2 was St. Mary's.
No.
Then 3, whatever St. Mary's is.
Okay, we got a tie. Give me, before I break it, give me your what your thoughts are on Iowa State future. Greg, I'll start with you.
I will be honest. I like the Iowa State future. This was gamesmanship to try and get my Michigan State one across because I knew Mike was voting for yours. Iowa State is one of 4 teams I think are most likely to win the title. The one fear I have with them is who's the NBA level guy, which I do think is a necessity. I know that's become a talking point in recent years. I think Mark Titus trademarked that, but Curtis Jones is great. He was, I think, 0 for 8 or 1 for 8 from 3 last game. That's not necessarily a guy I trust to do it 6 consecutive games, but the defense is so high level anyway that it probably doesn't matter. As you mentioned, they're upgraded inside. I really like the play. This was gamesmanship to try to get my Michigan State across the finish line.
Calabrese.
I mean, if anyone has credibility to say he likes Iowa State, it's me, because I just dumped on this team all last year, and Lipsy doesn't have to be the offensive guy. He can be exactly who he is. He can be a defensive stopper. He can be a light facilitator. Any points are just, an added bonus. But when Momcilovic comes back, this team is better than Houston. I don't care what all these advanced analytics say. I got my eyes. This team is better than Houston because defensively, yes, Houston is super elite in the last 10 years. Iowa State's a damn good defensive basketball team. They're well coached. They're always prepared. They have a much higher, in my opinion, at full strength, offensive ceiling. And I've seen enough of Houston sputtering out in the second weekend. I know that Shed got hurt and that you can have some excuses, but this Iowa State team, I think, has a different gear, and I think you're going to see it. And at anything north of 10-1, this is, to me, one of the years where there's going to be absolute heavyweights that battle their way to the Final Four. I'm really hoping that, as always, we get an entertaining round of 64, round of 32. But I want to see Duke. I want to see Auburn. I want to see the best team in the Big 12, which I'm putting my neck out there saying it's Iowa State and not Houston. I want to see those teams in the Final Four, and I think they're one of them. So I'm going to go with the Cyclones here. I think it's a really good bet at this price.
Let me get one more concern pulse for you. I'll play devil's advocate here. How much of Iowa State's magic these last 2 seasons do we attribute to the awesome home court advantage that is in Ames? They haven't lost at home in over a season and a half, haven't lost this year, did not lose last year. Go through their schedule. They lost 8 games. They lost a bunch on the road to some not great teams. Lost to Kansas State, lost to Oklahoma. They lost some neutrals in the non-con that year. Look at this year. Lose at West Virginia, lose at Arizona, but even games they've won, they were down big at Arizona State. They were down big at Texas Tech. They were even down big at Iowa earlier this season. They're a totally different team at home. You can trust them at home in an NCAA tournament setting, neutral site. Yeah, it's not a true road game. I just think they're a different team. Those guards play different when they're not as comfortable in Ames.
You know what I like about college hoops as opposed to college football? It's like, it seems petty and it seems small, and you don't get away with saying like that was a quality loss in college football. People hate that. In college hoops, people will listen to that. What they did against Auburn in Hawaii, to me, that's the indication that against an absolute colossal team with a National Player of the Year, they were right there. So I think you're right.
An 18-point lead.
What's that?
They blew an 18-point lead.
They did. They were also, who else can get up by 18 on this year's Auburn team? So I think it cuts both ways.
I hear you, but like if we're going in on they're better than Houston, Houston will not blow an 18-point lead to anybody. I don't care who it is.
True, but I also, you know what? I'm going to keep your number on speed dial when they're down 6 in the tournament and they need LJ Cryer to be the man and not the complimentary, I'll shoot an open 3 kind of guy. I've had enough of the Houston experience. Like I said, absolutely upset proof in the first weekend. But after that, I'd rather have a team with a higher ceiling because it's going to take a really high ceiling to make it to the Final Four and to beat any of these teams. And I don't see Houston doing it. Like the win against Kansas was absolute fairy magic dust sprinkled over the Cougs in that game. There's no way they should have won that. They've also had some issues in close games. They could have lost to UCF as well, messing around there. So we just agree to disagree, but I think, once again, putting all this into perspective, everything comes down to price. I'd be with you on Michigan State if it was 10-1. That's where my vote would have gone. If this was 6 or 7-1, Iowa State, I'm out. But at 12-1, I think it's really good value because I think they're not that far away from these elite teams, and the Auburn game is enough evidence for me to make the jump.
Stuck, I'm getting priced by a guy that brought minus 165 to the futures table today.
Houston blew a 17-point lead to Alabama a couple years ago. They did blow a double-digit lead, 14-13 against San Diego State on neutral court earlier this year in the second half, which is shocking. I don't know how that happened. All right, we're going with Iowa State. Put it on the board. Iowa State, national title future. So we got Iowa State, win it all, 12-1. Illinois to make the Final Four, Texas A&M to make the Final Four. All right, before we get into our rapid-fire bets for the weekend, we got another America East Minute from our guy, Tanner McGrath.
Thanks, boys. Welcome back to the AM East Minute, hosted by yours truly, the world's biggest fan of this stupid low major league. Update on the standings entering Thursday night's games. Bryan is 6-0. Maine is 5-1. Vermont is 4-2. UMBC and Lowell are both 3-3. Albany's 3-4. New Hampshire, Binghamton, and NJIT all have 5 losses, the clear cellar dwellers of the league. The biggest news of the week in the America East, Lowell point guard Caleb Murphy will make his debut this week. He's been out for the entire year based on academic eligibility issues, but it's massive that he's back now because now you can get Quincy Clark out of the lineup. He has been a mess running point for Lowell, not helping their turnover issues, and he single-handedly blew the game against Maine last Saturday. Murphy did post a 28% assist rate to a 15% turnover rate with South Florida a few years ago. Throwing a true facilitator in the mix with Somerville, Covington, Mincy, and Brooks could make that offense really unstoppable. Of course, they may never learn how to rebound a basketball, so none of this probably matters. Lowell visits UMBC 1 p.m. on Saturday. UMBC has been going zone heavy lately, playing mostly zone defense in upset wins over Albany and Vermont last week. Jim Ferry is a chiropractor. He's a guy who's going to adjust and readjust as the year goes on. I don't know if that is sustainable. I mean, Albany's zone offense is so gross under Dwayne Killings because he can't coach. And Vermont didn't have either TJ Hurley or TJ Long. So they had no shot of beating the zone over the top. Lowell is a good zone offense with 3 versatile playmaking forwards who could all act as that kind of high post pin man. Of course, on the other end of the court, UMBC's offense is scary when it's clicking, and they could rip apart Lowell's vulnerable defense. The Riverhawks are bad at the point of attack, and they haven't defended the interior well, so Bryce Johnson and company could just attack off the bounce over and over. These two teams rank among the top 3 conference teams in paint points per game and in the bottom 3 in paint points per game allowed. So it should be a really fun matchup and potentially a good over game, but I need to see how UMBC plays Bryan on Thursday before making any strong takes here. Maine heads to Patrick Gymnasium in Burlington, Vermont, 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, and this feels like a dead shot under game to me. Even if TJ Hurley returns from injury, I think you can just zone Vermont to death. Their offense is so broken. They have no spacing to run the 5 out, and they have been a disgusting zone offense this year. It's half the reason why they lost to UMBC last week. And Markwood has been awesome in how and when he deploys the use of his aggressive 2-3 zone with Jaden Clayton and Kellen Tynes at the head of the snake. On the other end of the court, Vermont, for all of the catamount flaws this year, is still a very good ball screen coverage unit with Shamir Bogues at the point of attack, which is so important against Markwood's ball screen motion offense. Also, Maine is still due for all sorts of negative 3-point shooting regression on offense. And once that hits, those ball screen lanes for Tynes will close up. Also, the pace in this game should just be plodding. I mean, both games between these two went way under last year. Bryant visits NJIT 2 p.m. Eastern. Should we go back to the well and hit NJIT first half again? I think so. They've covered the last 3 times, I think, in the first half. Once again, this team has very solid top 5, but no depth, so they keep up in the first half before flailing in the second. Bryant struggled in the first half against Binghamton and New Hampshire before taking over in the second last week. And I still think Bryant is juiced in the markets. I still question their offensive efficiency and execution, and I still question how they play on the road. And they are just a tad vulnerable in how they defend the dribble. So I think Tariq and Sebrov can take advantage of that. Finally, Binghamton visits Albany at 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday for a little Am East nightcap, and I have no clue what will happen in this game. I lean Albany because I still think the Danes are a tad undervalued because of their athleticism. And Binghamton is just horrendous at defending the dribble. They are just absurdly flat-footed. And so they can't stop fouling anyone. I mean, Albany won the first head-to-head matchup basically only because they went to the line 25 times. Binghamton also shot 45% from 3 at home in that head-to-head matchup and still lost by 5. But again, Binghamton could just crash downhill against Albany's horrific interior defense. I have no clue what will happen. I'll probably stay away from this one. Otherwise, thanks, guys, and I hope to see you next week.
Thanks, Tanner. And before we get to some weekend looks, just want to remind everyone that the stage is set for Super Bowl 59 and the many prop bets to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time pick alerts from our experts like Super Bowl prop masters Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon, plus all the tools you need to turn a profit betting in 2025. Right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB for Super Bowl. Again, that's actionnetwork.com/SB. That's $40 off for the full year, so you'll be covered for the Super Bowl, March Madness, baseball, NBA, and even next college football and NFL season. So don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off Action Pro. And if you're looking for early Super Bowl props from Sean Kerner, Chris Raybon, and more, check out the Action Network podcast for 2 sets of live shows. Next Wednesday, February 5th, the first will be at 4 p.m. Eastern and the second at 6 p.m. Eastern. So mark your calendars for Wednesday, February 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Eastern on the Action Network YouTube page and in the Action Network app. All right, let's get to some weekend looks. I'll start. I already mentioned the Tennessee spot. Here's a good spot. This is a team that's right squarely on the bubble that could use a win. UCF against BYU. I think this is a good spot. BYU off an overtime win against Baylor. They have Arizona on Monday. Tricky trip out east. BYU's not been the same team away from home. They're 353rd in Haslametrics away from home metric. They have 1 win on the road against Colorado. They have losses. Obviously they lost at Houston. They lost to Providence, Utah, TCU, all on the road. UCF playing better. In January, top 20 adjusted offensive efficiency. They're 21st in momentum. I think they can give BYU's defense trouble in multitude of ways. Off the dribble and from 3. BYU gives up a ton. They're either going to zone or pack it in, and their defense just really isn't that athletic. I think UCF can take advantage. And UCF's not really rim reliant, and that's all BYU tries to take away with their structure. UCF also has played the hardest schedule in the Big 12 to date. BYU, one of the easiest. Look at UCF's league losses. Kansas twice. They almost won at Lawrence. At Iowa State, at Arizona in the game they were in. Houston at home by 1. And this is still a team with wins at Texas Tech and at home against A&M. I think their pressure can bother BYU. UCF's transition defense is horrible, but BYU won't hurt them there. UCF's also elite at taking away the 3, limiting 3-point attempts. That's important against BYU. So, this is the number 1 3-point attempt rate offense in BYU versus the number 1 3-point attempt rate defense in UCF. UCF also wants to run. BYU's transition defense is horrendous. When they're in the half court, a lot of isolation ball with Hall, Johnson, and Ivy Curry. BYU really bad defending in that aspect. 19th percentile for synergy. I think it's a great spot, great matchup for UCF. BYU not the same team on the road. So give me the Knights at home. Greg, what do you got?
First off, I love the UCF spot for sure. The coast to coast trip for BYU is always scary, and UCF's been playing really well lately. I am gonna go try and pinpoint what I am calling a reverse Signetti here. We have Purdue and Indiana on Friday night, and if you take yourselves back to college football season, you know exactly what happened when these two teams met. A very competent football coach against a very overmatched football coach in Ryan Walters was packed up. I think they lost by around 60 points, and he was fired in about 5 days. Matt Painter has a chance to get some revenge here. Mike Woodson is so on the hot seat. I mean, if this really is a dramatic loss, we could see an in-season firing, I think. It's almost certainly happening at the end of the year. Indiana, the close game results these last two games, I think, are muddying the fact that this team purely does not have a lot of fight when they play some of the best teams in the country. Think back to what we saw in the battle for Atlantis. They were down 28 to Louisville. They were down 20 to Gonzaga before losing by double digits. 5 of their losses have been pure no-show blowout fashion this year. I think that Purdue, with a week to prep in Mackey Arena, I mean, you just saw the blowout win they had against a much better team in Michigan that offered the same inside dominant size problems that the best version of Indiana in theory should here. I'm not going to bet against Painter. And they blew out this program last year. Obviously, Zach Edey was there. But when Purdue's been sizably better than Indiana, they've had no problems with this Indiana program in recent years. Somehow, some way, Mike Woodson comes into this game 3-3 against Matt Painter in his college tenure at Indiana. I think Painter wants to leave a little bit of a sting, a sour taste in his mouth, knowing this could be his last chance at him. I expect a run up the score type victory from Braden Smith and the Boilers at home.
They blew him out twice last year, right?
Yep, 20 and 21.
Yeah. Let me see. Let's go to Friday. You have a Friday look, Mike.
I do. Last Friday, by the way, thanks Boilermakers for absolutely killing my golden player prop. They just boat race Michigan. The Wolverines fire up, 33s in that game instead of running their offense. And I think he still got to 14. But if it was a regular game, I think it was still the right side of it. But that you always have to take that into account. Blowouts, foul trouble, whenever it comes to bigs. Friday, I like Princeton over Yale in the Ivy. The Bulldogs are probably going to be favored here, even though it's on the road. The Bulldogs are 11-6 overall, 4-0 in Ivy League play. But they played the bottom of the barrel. They played Columbia, Harvard, Brown, Dartmouth. Those 4 teams overall, 34-34 in Ivy play, 4-12. Princeton, meanwhile, thanks to Evan Mia, we have this resume quality metric. They are tops both in wins and losses. So you look at what they've been able to do and acquit themselves when they've been playing up this year. They've really done a nice job. And listen, they whipped St. Joe's. They upset Rutgers, which the big caveat whenever you're talking about a game of the Scarlet Knights, was Dylan Harper available and healthy? Yes, he was. And they still beat him. So zooming out for this game in particular, I got Xavier Lee, I got Caden Pierce. I think they're the 2 best players on the floor, and to be in any position to be catching points, or if it's a true coin flip, I like it. Yale star John Poulikitis, he's been up and down lately. He shot them out of the game with Rhode Island. I know he scored a ton in that game, but he was 2 for 10 from 3-point range. A dud against Brown, not that they needed him in that win. And 4 for 13 against Dartmouth. If he doesn't play really well and he doesn't hurt Princeton from the perimeter, I think the Tigers are going to win this one by 2 or 3 possessions because they're really strong in the defensive glass. They don't turn it over. And they just need to survive a 3-point barrage if it comes, because teams have shot decently well against Princeton from long range this season. But like I said, I got the 2 best players on the floor. This is a game that's going to go a long way in determining the regular season champ in the Ivy. I think Princeton's the best team in the Ivy, so I've been waiting for a nice situation to get a decent price, and this is the only time it's going to come. The rest of the time for Princeton, they're going to be laying big points outside of playing Yale, so I'll go here in the Ancient 8.
Yeah, I mean, Princeton's going to have to make their threes here because they're not going to get any rebounds on the offensive end, but they don't turn it over. And like you said, they are good on the defensive glass, which is important against Yale. But Yale gives up a ton of looks from the outside, and Princeton's a good shooting team. So if they can just make their threes at home, I like the spot as well. Greg, I'll go back to you. You mentioned Michigan. Calabrese has mentioned Golden. You're looking to fade Michigan on Saturday?
Yeah, I am, especially given Golden's status, because after that Purdue dud, he came home against Penn State and was sick and tried to tough it out, but just did not look like himself at all. I think he played 17 minutes, 4-2. I mean, he's never been that low on production in a Michigan uniform and just 100% did not look like himself. So, look, betting on Rutgers or even betting any part of a Rutgers game is a terrifying proposition, given you never know who's available or what the status is. I mean, I despise.
Of course, they win at Northwestern with like everyone out.
Yeah, I just despise that this program seems to keep it shrouded in mystery. I mean, why can't we just report that Dylan Harper's hurt before the Madison Square Garden game against Michigan State? But regardless of the ins and outs lately for Rutgers, somehow they've been playing better, and it's mostly due to Ace Bailey's dominance. They're 3-2 in their last 5 outright, but Torvik has them the 42nd best team in the country. We don't know what's going to happen with Harper, but as long as Bailey is playing to this level with the shot making he's been doing really for 5 games. I know the 37 points against Northwestern was one thing, but he's been sensational for the last 5 games. And he's in that a matchup nightmare for Michigan, because you've got to try and go Danny Wolf on him. And as special as Danny Wolf has been, he's probably going to end up in foul trouble or just spending so much effort on the defensive end that it ends up affecting him offensively, which can't happen if Vlad Golden's not 100%. Meanwhile, while Rutgers is trending up, Michigan's been really bad. This is not a little blip. They're 2-2 in their last 4 games, 103rd nationally in that span. The biggest change is teams have figured out how to guard the big-to-big stuff with Danny Wolf. Purdue just switched it, and they had no answer. Danny Wolf has always struggled as a one-on-one scorer going back to his time at Yale, especially if Vlad's not healthy. There's nobody they can throw the ball inside to. The guard play for Michigan is not good enough. If you try to move it to Trey Donaldson, he's uncomfortable running pick and roll. So I think Steve Peichel, this year's defense, not nearly as good with Harper and Bailey and the in and out of the lineup, but Peichel's a great defensive coach. If there's a scout on a team that is out that he can prepare his guys with, he's going to have them ready. I think Michigan's really easy to scout right now. Rutgers catching points at home. I think they can win the game outright.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go there, but who's playing for Rutgers? Question I'll be asking the entire year. I'm going to go Wake Forest. Hopefully this is coin flippish line, what it's projected to be at home against Pitt. Wake's tourney chances on life support. If you look at their schedule, where are the big wins going to come from? They need this game. And first of all, this is a fate of Pitt, who I'm not a believer in this year. Also a good spot for Wake. They're coming off 2 straight losses, but it's against the 2 hottest teams in the ACC, in Duke and Louisville. As I mentioned, their tourney lives are on the line against Pitt. Major revenge spot here. Pitt knocked them out of the tourney last year in the ACC tournament. That game was basically an elimination game. Whoever lost it had no chance of getting in. Wake lost that game. This Pitt team, dead last in away from home metric per Haslam metrics. Their ball screen defense is poor. Wake can also get buckets in the post. Wake Forest is horrendous on the glass. It kills them in so many games, but so is Pitt. Like, it's not going to crush them in this particular matchup. They're also due to just make some shots at home. They're shooting 27.9% from 3 at home. I know they're not a good shooting team, but they're not that bad. They also can live in the mid-range in this matchup, which is where they're most efficient. But I just trust in this spot the Wake defense much more. I mean, the Wake defense is legit, like top 20, top 25 caliber. The Pitt defense is bad. There's holes all over. I think this is a good matchup and a good spot for Wake on Saturday against a Pitt team that just has not been the same on the road. So give me the Demon Deeks. Calabrese, what else you got?
All right, I got one bottom of the barrel that I'm very excited to get to in a SWAC matchup of the year. But let's talk UConn at Marquette first. Golden Eagles laying 6.5. I'm interested in the home favorite because I was thrilled to see UConn pull that out of the fire against DePaul and keep themselves a little bit competitive in terms of the spread here. They just can't be trusted on the road. They can't be trusted defensively. Like, talk about a drop-off from a team that you watched the Huskies under Hurley last year, and you're like, this team is like a Swiss watch on both ends of the floor. They are playing 3-dimensional chess. They know exactly what they're doing, how to take the strengths of every single opponent away from them. That's not this team this year. They look lost at times. They're still working on their rotations, in terms of both who's on the floor and then actually moving to cover open shooters. And we touched on it earlier. I think Greg was dropping some stats about Cam Jones in conference play. He's 8 for his last 32 from long range. This is a 38% career three-point shooter. I think particularly at home, if you're trying to bank on a bounce-back spot for Jones, this is it. But even with him trailing off, his teammates have stepped up to the tune of Marquette going 9-1 straight up in their last 10. They've covered 3 in a row. So yes, their overall ceiling, if you want to talk about what happens in March with this team, they can't go very far without Cam Jones putting on the Superman costume here. But in this game, I'm going to hope that he gets to 20 points. And if he does, I'm just looking at this UConn team that I still think is taking on water. Because if you want to talk slumps, Caravan, 5 for his last 27 from the floor. He fouls out against Xavier in a loss. Couldn't throw it in the ocean against DePaul. I think he was 1 for 14. What's wrong with him? He was somebody who was such a reliable role player in the last 2 title runs. And UConn, 11th among Power Conference team in Haslametrics Paper Tiger ranking. They've just come unglued. So the last part of it is Huskies last year at this point, and then how they finished the year, first in Evan Mia's defensive rating. This year, they're 6th in the Big East. They're just another team. Just take the name brand away, take Hurley's name away from this, because he hasn't been able to coach him up this year to pull him out of this. And I know 2 possessions seems like a lot. I'd probably go up to 7.5 in this spot, but I think this is the right side. I think Shaka Smart is going to get a win that's going to put a little bit more win behind them as they try to race to the finish here in the Big East.
Yeah, I do worry about UConn defending Marquette in all their pick and roll action. I mean, that's the way that UConn has been playing defense. That's very worrying. Maybe UConn gets McNeely back, though. But I also do worry about Marquette. I just don't know exactly. I can't pinpoint exactly what's wrong with their offense. I worry about them on the glass. And will they actually get to the line? Like, that is UConn's. They foul everybody. Marquette never gets to the line, this team. So what gives there? But yeah, UConn is they're kind of just still living on their old reputation as far as their lines are concerned. I mean, when's the last time they covered at Georgetown? Other than that, I think they haven't covered. Man, you got to go back to like mid-December. So yeah, they've not sure where the bottom is for UConn from a market perspective. But I do worry about their defense in this particular matchup. By the way, do you know who's number 1 in that Haslametrics paper tiger metric? Like the least paper tiger?
Wasn't it Baylor for a while? I think Baylor, it's changed because Baylor's...
No, weren't they the most? They were the most paper tiger.
Right. Yeah,
I'm saying the least.
Oh.
So number one in that metric. Wake Forest. So I have a theory that Wake Forest, their metric, from like a metric standpoint, and like they were hurt by some, like they played a bunch of quad 4 games, and they were up by like 24, like with 8 to go, and gave up like 15-0 runs and like meaningless runs to make it look like they only won by 8 to 10. So which like makes their profile look a little worse overall. And that's why they're, from a paper tiger perspective, if you look at that metric, like they play the better teams better, but that might be just because of some of those runs against the worst teams. Wake Forest definitely an interesting team. Greg, one of the biggest games. By the way, Arkansas, Kentucky. This city is abuzz. I think the line's out now, 11.5. You got a lot of the Arkansas players who used to play for Kentucky coming back. Coach Cal obviously coming back. Curious to see the reception there, and that should be interesting. The other big game of the day, UNC Duke. You have a play here, Greg?
I do. I'm going to bring some historical rivalry numbers to this. Now, I understand this is a very unique rendition of this rivalry because it's one of the bigger mismatches in terms of caliber of team that we have seen in this rivalry. So take all of this with a grain of salt. But I had a little hypothesis that going back through the years, the first meeting of the two in this rivalry is usually the game that is played closer. If there is some sort of mismatch, the second game maybe is where the team exploits it. But with two storied programs that always have big time one and done type freshmen coming in, there's a feeling out process early in what a North Carolina Duke rivalry is. And maybe you don't see the full go version of either team in the first rendition of it. In 22 first meetings, going all the way back to 2003, 17 of the 22 have been decided by single digits. That is way more than the second meeting if you go through the series here. And since 2003, if you do look for the times where there's been one team here that's significantly better than the other, there have been 10 games total, so 5 years since 2003, where one of these two programs has been top 10 nationally, and one of them has been outside the KenPom top 25 at the end of the year. 8 of those 10 meetings were decided by 13 points or less. The spread's at 13.5. That's what I'm seeing to open this. I think it's a lot of points. RJ Davis, 6-3 against Duke. He's going to be comfortable here. You think about the personnel in this game. North Carolina swept Duke last season. Davis, Cadeau, Trimble, Withers, Washington, all on the floor playing serious minutes in those games. Duke really has Tyrese Proctor that's a serious part of this rotation that's been in this moment before. Everybody else is brand new. And look, I don't like fading Cooper Flagg as much as I'm sure you guys don't, but there is going to be some, whoa, this is big. This is not Wake Forest at Cameron Indoor anymore. Are we ready for this? And I think the reality with Carolina is they are talented enough to play with anybody. I mean, they have had chances to win their biggest games this season. They led in the final 4 minutes against Kansas, Michigan State, Florida, Wake Forest, Pitt. They couldn't score
They just
late.
can't close out a game.
That's a problem. But this team is not sizably worse in talent than anybody in the country. And Duke has been a lot different since Malik Brown went out. This defense that looked like the very best defense in college basketball has been 11th in the country in the last month. Their offense, 23rd. You add it up, Duke is 9th in the country in their last 7 games per Torvik over the last month. Some teams that have been better than Duke in that span. Michigan State, Auburn, Louisville, Florida. North Carolina's played all 4 of those teams. North Carolina covered 13 points against all 4 of those teams. I'm going to take the Tar Heels with the points here. It's as gross as it sounds, but I think it's the right play.
By the way, shout out to Kentucky for that win at Tennessee, shorthanded. Got to mention my Cats. One, and yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Who's covering Flag, though? Just nobody? He's just going to get his, whatever?
Just nobody.
So, yeah, it is a good point on the Duke defense, though. Last one from me. I'll make it quick, so we're going over on time. It's time. I think it's time to sell Creighton. Give me Eric Dixon to go for 30 against the cough drop, as he always does. I think he goes for 30 every time he plays Creighton, and Villanova beats Creighton at home. All right, that's it. You got anything else, Calabrese?
I mean, I wore my Delta Devil green to talk.
Oh, yeah, we got Mississippi Valley State, the first plug of the year.
Oh, all the fans
boy.
in their car driving 2.5 hours from Itta Bena, Mississippi to Pine Bluff to take on the Golden Lions. Bart Torvik does a 0 to 100 thrill factor for every game. This is rated -9, the lowest game of the entire year. Disrespectful, Torvik, just disrespectful. Give me the Delta Devils plus 15.5 here. Arkansas Pine Bluff, second to last in KenPom. The Delta Devils dead last. But here's the thing. The Devils' defense looked pretty good against Southern, who's going to win the SWAC, and against Grambling. They held those teams to 65 and 63 in the past 2 games. Pine Bluff, the worst home court in the SWAC. First time they've been favored all season long against a Division I team. Now all of a sudden they're laying close to 16. And the assignment's simple. Just stop Doc Bradley. Hell, he may even stop himself. The guy can turn it over 5 to 10 times in a single game. He's the whole offense. He's going to take 15 to 20 shots. A lot of them are going to be threes. They're going to run plenty of stuff through him. So the high variance factor here, if he got into foul trouble somehow, all of a sudden, the Delta Devils could have a shot to win this thing outright. And this message is for you, Art Tate. I need your brother. He's the best player on this team. He gave Grambling 21. He gave Utah 23 earlier in the season. He is the only option offensively. If he can get 15 to 20, I think they can muck this up, hang around. I'll be glad to take the points. And a shout out to, they've had just some of the best announcers, Mississippi Valley State, over the past couple of years. Andre Williams Jr., Caleb Brunson last year when they won their first game of the season. I thought they were going to storm the court. They have a rotating students, play-by-play color combo. I hope that this becomes an iconic game. They get a win. It goes viral. They deserve it. Everyone who's associated with this program, they've taken so many paycheck games. They've traveled. They've been, the road warriors playing all across the country, essentially bringing in money, not just for the basketball team, but for the whole athletic department. So my heart is with you, Delta Devils. Please keep this within 16 points. Arkansas Pine Bluff doesn't deserve to be that much of a favorite. Almost 17 points against anybody. So there we go. There's my SWAC play.
There used to be, I think, what was the website? Greenwood Live? There used to be some radio show. Maybe it's still around that broadcasts SWAC games. Hilarious. Amazing website. I gotta find it. I'll tweet it out. Was it Goodwood or Greenwood? I forget. I'll find it. All right, Mississippi Valley State. I can promise you I will not be joining you on this bet. So good luck. And where's it at? Where's it going to be broadcast? Is it on YouTube? Are those on YouTube?
This one, hold on. I have the Arkansas Pine Bluff pulled up here. Let's take a look.
I haven't watched the SWAC game this year.
It is on the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff Sports Network, so you're going to be able to stream it live off of their website. Hopefully for
you got to pay?
Yeah, I don't want a Hawaii football $69.99 situation or having to pay for a whole SWAC package, but I think this is going to be free.
All right, gentlemen, thank you, Greg, Mike, for joining me. I'm glad you got your Mississippi Valley State mention in for the year. If they cover, I'll let you do it again. If not, you're done. Thanks to our producer on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Leave a 5-star review, really helps us out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow along on the Action Network app. Thanks again for tuning in. Good luck on all of your wagers this weekend. We will see you next week. Cheers.